Good
Man,
evening, everybody.
that one where he just impales him is always my favorite panel. Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
that one's just well drawn.
yeah. It is. Yeah, I love that panel too. It's probably one of my favorites in the whole book. Uh, anyway, welcome to another episode of Tuesdays with Story.
Hey, hey.
I'm Daniel Parker, and I'm the writer and creator of the comic book that you just saw the trailer for that we were just talking glowingly about, Guardian Angel. The mailing list is now live on Indiegogo. You can sign up for it today, and if you do, you will not only have access to a secret tier where you can get an alternate virgin cover, but you will also get a free art print if you're amongst the next. Well, the first 50 are getting one art print, and the next 50 are getting another art print. So, if you want to get
Yes. Be there and be square.
yes, it's hip to be square. And of course, link is in the description down below. And joining me, as always, my co-host down here.
Yep. D.B. Fastbinder, author of Confessions of the Magpie Wizard, among other things, though not too many other things, but still other things.
Yes,
But that's the main one. Go buy my book on Kindle. Let, let me retire from my day job, please. For
yes,
for actually less than the price of a cup of coffee if you go to Starbucks, you can have a whole Kindle book to yourself.
although I don't know why you would want to get coffee at Starbucks.
Um, you have more money than taste. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess.
I mean, if you want a milkshake, that's the frappuccinos are pretty decent for that.
Mm, yeah.
You just have to pretend that they're not a milkshake.
Yes. Come to think of it, I don't think I've ever had a Starbucks cup of coffee. I'm not a coffee drinker, so
Yeah, it's basically a very. My understanding is that their process. And I know a few things. 'Cause I'm actually from the Seattle area, so you hear things. Is
mhm.
that they got their start because there was a small, like they were, I forget if they were actually called Starbucks at the time, but some guy who sold espresso, used either espresso machines or espresso equipment, and noticed that this one shop in Seattle was using more coffee filters than entire large segments of the business. He's
Uh,
like, what the heck is going on here? And then he went in and it was kind of Ray Kroc'd it up and bought. I think he bought into the company.
uh, yeah. Well, anyway,
Either way, very harsh coffee.
yes,
Not recommended, but Confessions of Magpie Wizard recommended.
yes, highly recommended. Yes, link to this is in the description down below, along with the Royal Road on Saga the Storm Wizard and DB's Patreon. Uh, Definitely want to join DB's Patreon. He puts a lot of cool stuff, from early access to books and some cute girl art.
Yes. In fact, maybe if the audience demands it, uh, we can show some of it off. Since this week we're talking about romance, and
Yes.
D Rhino is here with a question.
Oh, D Rhino. Let's see. Can love blossom on the
Okay.
battlefield?
Well, that's an excellent place
Hmm.
for it to blossom or for it to bloom in fiction.
Yes. Reality, I don't not so sure.
Depends on how lonely the soldiers get.
Mm, yeah.
Uh,
Depends
uh,
on what kind of what kind of it depends on, of course,
What,
a
what
lot
kind
of
of
moving
warfare?
parts.
Okay.
Yes, what kind of warfare are we talking about? Yeah.
I imagine it'd be easier in trench warfare because you'd be sitting around for long periods of time with nothing else to do.
Yeah. Stuck in a confined space.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like prison, but you more dangerous.
Yeah. Uh, but yes, our topic tonight is, of course, romance, and we're gonna be. It's gonna be like I guess, a free flowing discussion, if you will. We have a few different uh, examples that we're going to go over and talk about, but I mainly want to just kind of like romance as a genre. Obviously there's romance as a genre, and there's also romance as a subplot for a story.
Mhm. It's the difference between a chili that happens to have onions and French onion soup.
Yes. And depending on the story you're writing, obviously, with romance, if it's just straight up romantic tale, then you have to follow all the steps of that you would in a normal story of having a introducing the characters, inciting incident, you know rising action, climax, all that good stuff, and it usually
Uh,
follows with like the you know a meet cute story, and then a romance building, and then a climax, and then the climax would be like maybe something happens, and the two people part ways, and then they realize just how much they love each other, or something might happen that causes them to get back together, and then they get back together, and then they live happily ever after.
yeah, and it's funny that Daniel happened to bring this topic up, because I've been trying to think of a way to spin a concept from Chuck Dixon's weekly YouTube show into a whole episode. Because now this is one of those. Don't quote me on this, because he talks about this occasionally, but when I do online searches for it, nobody else uses this term. It's either the lovers rack or the romance rack, or uh, but all my online searches like either show up nothing or show up things that are mildly dirty. So clearly I'm probably misremembering it. But
Yeah.
it's basically, it's like the idea, like the medieval rack, the torture implement that you would put people on that would slowly stretch them and tear them apart.
Hmm.
Um, but while also, so it's like it's the element of the love story that, well, the characters have something that brings them together, but they also have to have something that tears them apart, and that's where the tension comes from. So to bring up an example, just because that dead horse, we can beat it a couple more times.
Yes.
The isekai genre.
Yeah.
Uh, that was actually one of my issues with the isekai genre, is that they would focus on this romantic storyline, but there wouldn't be like any conflict in this story because the story is therapeutic. You're not supposed to have conflict. Y- the closest you get to that's, I think it's actually why the tsundere stereotype, or the tsundere thing is
uh,
so big in archetype.
Archetype. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Archetype, just could not think of that word, is so big in anime, because it's like, well, we don't want to have like a real conflict. Let's just make the girl kind of obnoxious, and that's why they don't get together until we pull the trigger.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and that tends to be the the with every romance is once the couple gets together, that's the end of the story.
Uh, Or, and that's actually, or it depends. Again, it depends.
Hmm.
Are you making a French onion soup, or are you making a soup that happens to have onions? Like an example, actually trying to think of an example of stories that started with the romance.
Mm.
And I actually have two very old school examples. One is the old sitcom Bewitched,
Mm.
which actually started in the first episode with a guy named Darren marries Samantha, I think her name was. It's been a while since I watched it.
I think that's right. Yeah.
And then he discovers that she's actually a witch who is exactly as powerful as is needed for the plot to happen every week. So, like, the story started. They're already married, and they're already together. They already clearly love each other. So the tension isn't, oh, will they, won't they? The tension is, will Samantha get exposed to the neighbors as a witch?
Hmm.
Or, oh, will Samantha's backfiring magic doom them? Or will Samantha's awful mother managed to separate them. Uh,
Yeah.
so you can totally have a story where the romance is just a given. Um,
Mhm.
Now, what's interesting is that I can't think of a lot of adventure stories that do that.
The only one I can think of, um, and I don't know if it I don't know if it counts because it's the sequel, but The Mummy Returns.
Hmm. Okay, full confession. I have never seen a mummy movie.
Wow.
Basically, assume if it was fun and adventurous and it came out while DB was living at home with his parents, I probably didn't watch it.
But I didn't watch it. Well, okay, so the first two are good in my opinion. The CGI in the second one is really bad, but it's a fun story.
Mhm.
Third one is terrible, and don't and I can't comment on the Tom Cruise reboot, but I've heard it's really bad.
I
Um,
mean, it involved what's his name, who was involved with Star Trek Discovery, trying to start another cinematic universe. Who was also the guy who tried to get an Amazing Spider-Man cinematic universe going. Who was also the guy who,
is
uh,
ruining Star Trek.
yes, like Alex Kurtzman. That's it.
Kurtzman, yeah,
You lost me at Kurtzman.
yeah. But yeah, uh, so I'll have to mildly spoil the Mummy for you.
Sure.
But the movie starts off with he had Brendan Fraser's character, Rick O'Connell. He's who was used to be in the French Foreign Legion. Then he becomes kind of one of these roaming mercenary type guys.
Hmm.
And then you have Rachel Weisz's character, Evelyn, and then her brother, and I can't remember what her brother's Jonathan, I think was his brother's name, her brother's name. Anyway, they're the ones that the brother finds the map to the city of the dead, and then and then they enlist Brendan Fraser, Rick O'Connell to take him to the city of the dead. And throughout the first movie, there a lot of flirtations going on with Rick and Evelyn, and they do end up getting together at the end of the movie. And then by the Mummy Returns, they're married. They're married. I think it takes place like 8 or 9 years after the first movie,
Hmm.
and they're married and they have a son.
Okay.
And
See,
they're going around all these different tombs and places and stuff.
see. If the series had started with that, then it would count. I,
Okay.
I think it's because the nature of heroic fiction is such that getting the romantic interest is part of the adventure.
Right.
That now, I guess the exception is you can have a character who has a beloved wife and or child at the start of the movie, but then they die or get captured because
Mm,
that's a powerful lever to pull for the main character.
right. Well, would Die Hard can't. Well, Die Hard isn't really an adventure movie, but yeah,
Well, they're divorced at the start, but
separated. Not quite divorced yet, but yeah,
okay,
close. Yeah, close enough. Yeah. Yeah.
uh, divorced with extra steps.
Yes.
Uh, So, so yeah, that'd be a good example of the relationship is there, but it's strained
Hmm.
because, well, you need conflict in the movie.
Right.
So that was the Bewitched was the one example. The other one is the movie Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, which see how did DB ever see? That's the kind of stuff I grew up watching,
Oh, jeez.
and I don't entirely regret it because there are some good old musicals and such.
Hmm.
Um, Plus, as a YouTuber I used to follow, who I won't recommend necessarily because he kind of went off the deep end, said, if you watch old Cary Grant movies and you just copy his lines and just memorize his lines and steal them, no woman under 40 is going to have ever seen a Cary Grant movie, so they'll think you're a genius.
That's, that's a lot of truth to that. Yeah.
But Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, basic concept is it's the pioneer days, and this trapper gets married to a woman like he decides, I need a wife to take care of my house. Very old fashioned.
Hmm.
And they go, and he goes down into the town and gets married to the first person he meets, who's kind of lonely. And then his six brothers are like, well, we want wives too. And how do we get a wife? And well, my wife has had me reading about this Roman history. Ever heard of the Sabine women, where the Romans went and captured all the wives of the Sabines?
Jeez.
So they went into town and raided it and stole a bunch of girls, and it was a very awkward winter while they were snowed in.
Okay,
And,
yeah.
and they all eventually did fall in love with each other just due to, I don't know, Stockholm syndrome or whatever.
Yeah. Jeez.
Um, a movie you could not make anymore,
No.
and you know that there would, and I hope and pray that Hollywood keeps its eyes off of that movie. Just let it go. Let it be a thing that you can stumble across on HBO Max and wonder, wow, times sure have changed. Because there'll be like a stupid woke alternative, Seven
Oh,
Brothers for Seven Brides.
yeah. Yeah. And well, or they would turn it into a horror movie.
Yeah, which honestly wouldn't be too much of a twist. But anyway,
Yeah.
that's an example of one where the romance happens very early on, and the conflict is she is of course horrified. It's like, look, just because you got a wife that easily, because I liked you, doesn't mean that you can do this to people.
Yeah.
And so like that puts the strain on the relationship. So like
Yeah.
that's their love wreck.
Mm. Yeah, and so DB mentioned the will they or won't they, and of course in TV that's a fairly common trope used a lot with especially shows in the '90s, like the X Files, for example, was a The Hills Have Vibes.
I've got it. The hills have wives.
Ah, there you go. Maybe take out the cannibalism.
Like, it could
Uh,
be about a monster that lives in the hills and captures women.
yes. Although, God, I think there might be a few movies like that.
Like horror, you can make a horror movie for $30 and a what are those big sub sandwiches you can get for parties
Yeah.
over the course of a weekend. I would be shocked if any idea we could come up with for a horror movie has not been done somewhere by somebody.
Yes. Uh, but but yeah. So the X Files was an example of that. Doing that will they or won't they with Mulder and Scully, and for a long time, I mean that show ran, for, well, 9
10
years,
plus
and
nine. Okay.
yeah, I think it was 9 years, and then they brought it back for a couple of years, recently, and it didn't do very well. But I think it wasn't really until I think season 7 or season 8 when they finally got together. And even though they hinted at it throughout the run, like they even hinted at it in the movie when they almost kissed, and then they never mentioned it again after that.
Oh boy.
Yeah, but yeah, that was the tension there, because the way you kind of do that is like you have to have like a lot of as they say, the sexual tension,
Hmm.
where you can kind of tell that you watch, but you see from the interactions that there's something there, and which is kind of interesting when you watch that show, that the two that those two characters might have something going on when off screen. Pretty sure Duchovny and Gillian Anderson hated each other.
Oh, I thought you were going a different direction with that, considering that, as I recall, Duchovny actually had a sex addiction.
Yes, he did. That's true. Yeah, yeah, and Mulder did too.
Oh,
In the
they actually wrote that into his character in the show.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, that's amusing.
yeah, yeah. He had a well, it was a porn addiction. Yeah, he had
Huh.
Yeah, that was in one episode where like I think they open like he has in his apartment he had like a whole other room like his bed like he never slept in his bedroom for the first few seasons of the show. He always slept on his couch.
Hmm.
And then they went into his bed, and then I can't remember. It might have been Scully went into his bedroom, and it was just full of porn tapes and magazines.
Now, let me ask you this: if you're Scully and you wander into that room, would you be more disturbed if the girls looked like you, or if the girls looked like his missing sister?
Ooh, good question. Probably, I probably it probably more disturbing if they looked like his missing sister. You know,
Right.
because I mean that's just like, ooh. But yeah,
Yeah. Also, that's a series. My experience there is I came in very late. The only season I remember watching a significant amount of was the one where Mulder wasn't even around and Scully was pregnant with some sort of alien baby.
yeah,
That was
yeah,
I came in late.
yeah. That was God. That was like um yeah, I want to say that was year 8. Yeah, because they had to because I think Gillian Anderson was pregnant at the time, and they had to write it in, kind of like what they did.
Oh,
Kind of they did the same thing in I think in season 2, because she got pregnant, and then they had to write in how she explain her absence, and that was her
gotcha.
the whole abducting her abduction arc,
So,
story
so
arc.
okay, so as opposed to the Buffy the Vampire technique, where the director shouts at the women for being fat when they're pregnant, they actually
Yes.
decide to work with it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Chris Carter, the creator of the X Files. Yeah, he was not a chauvinist pig like Joss Whedon.
Yeah. Remember, feminism can be correct, but be suspicious of male feminists.
Yes, yes. But but yeah, like and I will say too with that with Mulder and Scully, like as soon as they did get together, it wasn't too big of a shock for that to happen. But at the same time, they still weren't, really all that together that much, because when they did get together, Duchovny was off the show pretty much at that point.
Right? He was trying to have a movie career.
Hmm. And and so the only real, uh, if I remember correctly, like the only time you ever see like the two of them actually having any sort of conflict with their relationship was in the last X Files movie, which was eh. Um, but they kind of like are grappling, with the fact that they're, it's the old, the old every time I try to get out they pull me back in, they because
Hmm.
they're trying to get out and live in normal life, but then they get pulled back into, an X Files like case.
Yeah. That. That and
That's
now, and that's a kind of that's like the, what that reminds me of is Scrubs of all shows.
mm,
Just how relentless the will they won't they there was. Because
yeah,
it's like
with yeah,
Elliot and what's his face,
JD,
JD.
yeah.
Yeah, it's like, oh, they're together, they're apart. They're together, they're apart. Okay, we're definitely setting them up with some other people. Oh, they decide to have sex. JD and Elliot have sex with each other to sabotage both of their weddings at the same time.
Yeah.
And JD a has knocked up the woman he is going to be marrying.
Hmm.
But no, he has to be with Elliot. Which I can only say, wow, that was the exact moment I checked out of that show.
Yeah.
It's like there's like true love conquers all, and that type of leaving somebody at the altar thing when you realize you've made a mistake, when you know who you really want to be with is one thing.
Hmm.
But I'm sorry, as soon as somebody is preggers, unless she
Yeah.
is awful, dick move, man.
Yeah. 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 Let's see. Dean Rhino says, uh, yeah, good horror theme. The brother has X-rated content with a woman that.
Yeah, that
Yeah, that would be a. Yeah, that would be a good good little story there. Maybe I don't know if that's something I would write, but
No, I'm not much of a horror guy. I would turn it into a dark comedy. I know me.
Yeah.
Uh, like the movie title would be something like, "What are you doing, stepbrother?"
Ugh. That sounds like a title for an anime or manga.
Uh, oh, it's a well-known adult anime meme.
Ah, yeah.
I've,
Yes.
I've I've even had friends who aren't particularly into anime make jokes based on that. Like, okay, here's the stupid pitch. What are you doing, stepbrother? It's about a guy who's like in his teens uh, is like his dad keeps getting married to people who have daughters, and he keeps murdering his new family.
There is actually there's a horror movie like that, The Stepfather.
See what I mean? See, as long as the barrier to entry for horror movies is, do you have $40, a camera, and a giant sub sandwich and a free weekend?
Yeah.
You can
Yeah.
make any horror movie you can conceive of. Although *Malignant*, I have to say, I could never have made up *Malignant*.
Yeah.
Have you
I
seen?
haven't seen that one. Yeah.
Do you mind a spoiler on it? It's actually
That's
halfway worth watching if you like horror. So
okay. Yeah.
I'll hold off.
Okay.
But it,
Um,
it does have a really weird twist that, in its own psycho logic, almost makes sense.
ah. But yeah. What was it? Oh, another example of that. And I know DB, you haven't watched the show, but on The Office, uh, Jim and Pam. That's John Krasinski, and then I can't remember the Jenna Fisher is Pam, and they kind of did the will they or won't they, but they didn't go very long with they didn't do the with them it was will they won't they, and then they do and then they don't and then they do and they don't. They didn't do that here. So what they did with Jim
Well,
and
that's a
Pam was
mark in its favor.
yeah, I thought so too. So what they did with Jim and Pam was at the start of the show, Pam is engaged to another guy who's
Hmm.
also working at the paper company. He works in the warehouse, and uh, but Jim and Pam are like really good friends, like really good friends. And when you watch the way they interact with each other, it looks like yeah, they really are into each other. But of course, Pam is engaged, so
Right.
they can't do anything. And then I want to say it was at the end of season two. Yeah, it was season two. Jim confesses his feelings for Pam,
Hmm.
and then although they did do the rack there was that after Jim confesses his feelings for her and she says, we can't be together. I'm getting married. He leaves that company. He gets transferred to another office,
Hmm.
and but then what brought them back together was that that office has to close, and then they move all the people at that office to the to the Scranton, Pennsylvania office, which is that's where the show takes place. And so Jim is back at his old office again with Pam, and then we find out that Pam and her fiance broke up. And then okay, so long story short,
They have a dramatic pipe fight with Corn Pop with at a length of chain.
yes,
Sorry,
some
I couldn't
things,
resist.
yeah,
I hear Scranton and I think weird stories.
corn pop, yeah. Corn pop was a bad dude. Uh, anyway, um, so long story short, Jim and Pam do end up start dating. They do eventually get married and then have kids,
Hmm.
and that's the throughout the show run. So they're the couple on in the office, and I thought that was really cleverly done because they didn't drag it. Well, number one thing, they didn't drag it out, and two, they kept them together for most of the time. And once, and then they said, okay, once they were together, they're together, and that's it.
Yeah. That's actually a lot of marks in their favor, in my opinion.
Hmm.
because so uh, going back to the concept of the lovers rack, that's one of like the easy ways to generate conflict and interest in a sitcom, especially or any sort
Hmm.
of comedy, because it's like you establish it early on. It's like, okay, these two have chemistry. Clearly, they like each other, but for some reason, they're too pig-headed to admit it, right?
Right.
So you progress the. It's like every sitcom, well, every live action sitcom I've seen has done some variant of this. Like even Big Bang Theory and things like that. It's like, okay, you introduce the two characters, you have them have some sparks.
Hmm.
Um, this is my spark hand gesture.
Sparks.
Sparks. Yeah, they do some sparks. They things go well. Then just when things are going well, oh, do we get another season? Okay, suddenly things go badly.
Hmm.
Okay, we're going on. Okay, do we get another season? Okay, so we got another season, so we don't resolve it at the end of this season, so we start building things back up again. And
Hmm.
then when you've gone back and forth enough times, okay, now they get married and now there's a kid and now we have kid humor.
Hmm. And then that's usually when the show is done.
Yep. Although sometimes you can get a couple extra seasons out of that too.
Hmm.
Actually, even Full House had it with Uncle Joey and what's her name, who eventually joined in.
Yeah, Lori Laughlin.
Yep,
Can't remember her
she
character
was a
name,
cutie.
but yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I'm trying to remember. There was well, another example of that would be with with Friends, where with Ross and Rachel.
I barely watched any Friends, and even I know that they were constantly will they, won't they?
Oh yeah, and for 10 years, for 10 years, and if I remember correctly, because I watched the last episode of the show because I watched the first. I'm kind of one of those people that like if I watch the first episode of a TV show and even if I tune out of it and then they do a last episode, I'm like I kind of want to have to watch the last episode even if I don't know what's going on. Um, so I watched the last episode with friends because I watched the first episode, and Ross and Rachel had a kid together.
But- And was it still up in the air if they would actually be together?
Yes, and they were living together too. They were living in the same apartment.
Okay, dude, lady.
Yeah, like
Eh,
hello.
yeah. In some states, you'd already be considered common law married.
And I would imagine in New York you would be considered common law married.
Actually, let's find out. Although I think common law marriage usually takes like 7 years to activate.
Okay.
Common law marriage, no, it's not. Lewis marriage. It's one considered valid by both partners, but not formally recorded with the state of religious registry. Let's see here. Canada, Australia. Wikipedia is a little bit suspect sometimes, but it is kind of nice because it is. I trust it for this question.
Yes.
Let's see here. Common law marriage can still be contracted in Colorado, Iowa, Kansas, Montana, Rhode Island, Texas, Utah, and the District of Columbia.
Mm,
Okay, so not New York.
so not New York. Okay.
So it's mostly been abandoned, apparently. Interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. Did was is Florida one of those?
No, actually. So
Oh,
that's one thing that Florida man can't get up to.
yeah. But yeah, it
But
that
still,
that's
still with modern judges, if they were to separate, he would be so on the hook for child support. So, dude, if you're already living with her and if you're talking rent arrangements, just put a ring on it.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, really. Um, but yeah, it's that in that case, I think it was to the show's detriment because
Yeah,
they just kept they just kept going with it, and
that sounds exceptionally frustrating to watch.
yeah, and especially when you had two of the other characters get married and have a kid, uh,
Yeah,
uh,
it was the
Chandler
dark-haired
and
one.
yeah,
Yeah,
Matthew Perry and Courtney Cox.
yeah, okay, yeah. and they've as I recall, the only thing cool about Ross, or no, the only was it Ross that we were just talking about?
Yeah, Ross.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the only thing
Yeah.
cool about Ross is that he was a paleontologist,
Yeah.
in my opinion. Like, well, I remember when I was like 13 and watched the occasional episode, like, this is the wow, he's a paleontologist. That's cool.
Yeah. But other than that, he's kind of a loser.
Yeah. Which we've brought up before how a character is what they repeatedly do. So if all a character is romantic waffling, then you're going to get tired of them.
Hmm. Yeah, and what was the other? I had another example of a. Well, okay. So another example I had. Actually, why don't we go to you were talking about Nightwing and
Yeah. So
yeah.
so like so like that's so I would call those examples of where the romantic rack is the plot, or
Hmm.
it's like what it's the framework you use for the plot. So like that's the French onion soup.
Hmm.
But if you're a writer, there's also a lot of circumstances where you go, okay, the romance may not be in this exact storyline what things are about, but it's a subplot I can draw on to step up the tension. Like in my own writing, I waffle between whether am I a romance that happens to have fantasy adventure, or am I a fantasy adventure that happens to have a lot of romance?
Hmm.
And the answer would vary book to book, in my opinion. Like some books are more focused on the romance angle, some are more focused on the adventure angle. But that's always like that's always a present thing. Um, part of like the part of where I like again, Daniel came up with this idea to talk about, and I was like, well, that's so funny that I've just been trying to think of a way to work this into something. So Chuck Dixon was a comic book writer. Well, he still is a comic book writer, but now he mostly works in the indies because his politics are not popular at DC Comics. Let's just say
Hmm.
he was the creator of Bane, among other characters, and he had a long run on Nightwing. And somebody asked him on his YouTube channel because where he has a mail-in show that I keep meaning to come up with a question for, but I never get around to it. And the question was, "Hey, why didn't you ever have Starfire show up in your Nightwing comic?" And that's a logical question because people who watch the Teen Titans cartoon, you think Robin. Like, okay, who's Robin? Who's the love of Robin's life? You go Starfire.
Hmm.
If and if, he'd been in part of the Teen Titans throughout the late 70s and 80s, so why wouldn't you have this character ever show up in the 90s comic when they finally give him his own adventure?
Hmm.
Well, and Chuck had a couple of answers there. One was kind of editorial. They had just like so most of the big comic book companies are divided into editorial groups that are in charge of particular families of titles, right?
Hmm.
It's like you might have somebody who's in charge of Superman or whatever Supergirl or Superboy or whatever other comics they're doing.
Hmm.
You might have one person whose job is Justice League and maybe like Green Lantern or stuff like that. Well, they had just finally gotten Nightwing away from the Teen Titans group and firmly under the Batman
Yeah.
group.
Uh,
So they wanted to have as little to remind you that he had been with the Teen Titans as possible at the time.
uh,
So that's like the boring editorial reason.
mhm.
By the way, is my laundry loud on your side?
I can't hear it. No.
Good. Okay. Okay. Hooray for using the dinky microphone.
Yeah.
But so, um, so, so that was like the boring editorial answer. The reason he gave is that he wanted to use Batgirl as the romantic interest, or she was Oracle at the time. She'd been crippled by the Joker and was like the tech person
Hmm.
because there was much more of the rack there because Starfire. What is Starfire? Well, she's a bubbly alien who is extremely sex positive. Is there
Hmm.
gonna, is there going to be a circumstance where like will they won't they work when you have a bubbly alien with the body like a body specifically based on a Puerto Rican belly dancer who who just who doesn't understand why humans have such hangups? No,
No.
um, if she shows up and Nightwing is interested, there's no conflict in this story.
Yes.
Meanwhile, you have another character who is doing her own thing. Might have complicated feelings about Dick or Nightwing, his real name.
Mm.
Not mm,
Yeah.
not complicated feelings about
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
but eh, might have complicated feelings about him. Have complicated feelings about their work. She's busy. He's busy. There's uh, but the sparks there. Spark, spark, sparkle, sparkle. You, you're you have more that you can build a story on. You
Hmm.
have more won't in the will they, won't they?
Yeah.
And so it's like it was one of those cases where sometimes editorial mandate can point you in the right direction anyway.
Yeah. Well,
Uh, Not that we don't love Starfire. Starfire is a fun character. It's just that she's a tad boring. Uh, like I'll be honest, when I read her in the comics, when I was a kid and teen, I was always like, okay, that is a character that is certainly there.
yes.
Uh,
It's yeah, your eyes are definitely drawn to her.
yeah, right. The eyes are drawn to her, but she never has much interesting to say because she's a happy character.
Hmm.
She's part of the ensemble, but not necessarily the most. I'd have a hard time writing or having a serious discussion about something.
Yeah.
Um, I actually enjoyed the version in the cartoon more because she had a bunch of weird affectations, and she had like the weird, like she was the stranger in a strange land. So there's like a lot of fun you can have with a character who doesn't understand Earth culture.
Hmm.
So I felt that was a step in the right direction for her. Weird that they've like with all the reboots they've done at DC that they've never made her quite like that. Because you'd think that would be a slam dunk, considering that's the version that anybody who grew up on Teen Titans and Teen Titans Go would be familiar with. So you'd
Hmm.
think that making her more like that version would be what you'd do if you're doing a company wide reset every 5 years. You would have tried that at least once.
Yeah, you would think, and that would definitely sell more comic books. I would think. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh well, I don't work for DC Comics and I probably never will. So
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. If DC wants to make bad decisions, I just
uh,
say let them, and
uh,
you know.
more money for your comics.
Yes, exactly. But but yeah, it's so okay. So I actually have a better example of something that we were going to discuss before, but I have a better example. I was going to
Mhm.
mention moonlighting, but I never watched moonlighting.
I only know it by
So
reputation too.
yeah, like my parents watched it because they were at that age, at the same age that Bruce Willis and Sybil Shepherd were when the show was on. So, but that was a but I kind of have a better example because the dynamic of these two characters is similar, and it was with Bones. Um, so if you never watched Bones, yeah, yes, DC is dead comics equals dead comics. But Bones was about these uh, the two characters. So Bones is Dr. Temperance Brennan.
Hmm.
She's a forensic anthropologist, and she works with an FBI agent named Seeley Booth.
Hmm.
And they, whenever a crime occurs, where all they have is a set of bones, they investigate the murder.
Hmm.
And throughout the show, especially in the first couple of seasons, the the tension between those two is a lot different than from other shows. So the tension with them is that they're always on they get on each other's nerves.
Mm.
They're always just like, because Booth or Brennan is very, she's very intellectual. She's a scientist, and she's, you know, uh, talks about things in a very analytical way. And Booth is very, is the opposite. He's, everything's on his instincts. He's a man of faith. He's just, he likes going by his gut rather than, going by the science. And so that leads to a lot of, headbutting between the two of them.
Right.
Yeah, and which makes for very entertaining television, at least until they jump the shark in the third season when uh, Brennan's assistant uh, turned out to be an accomplice for a cannibalistic serial killer.
Well,
Yeah, yeah. But I kind of lost interest in the show after that. But from what I could tell from seeing like some clips and stuff, they did eventually get together, and they had a kid.
hmm
So you know that. So that's another one where like you follow in the natural progression of it, where but it's kind of funny that it starts off with they're at each other's throats all the time, and they're always arguing with each other and everything. But then they're able to find some common ground between the two of them, and obviously they have you know they obviously kind of like each other in a
right.
romantic sense. So
It is almost like the Sundari archetype, where the two characters are bickering all the time, just a more interesting version of that.
yes.
And that's like a oh, of course, we've I think we've mostly talked about the rack in terms of where it emerges from the characters. You can also have an external rack, which
Mhm.
God, if I was more professional podcaster, I would have taken some time after work. So I did my 3 mile run today, so didn't have a lot of time between work and podcast. I would have double checked that episode just to see what his term was, but you can also have an external rack that separates them. Classic example: Romeo and Juliet.
Mhm.
Like, oh, well, I mean, if these two crazy kids could just be together, everything would be hunky dory. But their families hate each other's guts,
Yeah.
and they're honor bound to try to kill each other.
Yes, and if you well, I was going to mention West Side Story, but the West Side Story is Romeo and Juliet, but with
More contemporary. Yep.
more contemporary, and it's a musical, and it's I think it was Puerto Ricans and Italians.
Puerto
The-
Rican. I don't know if they were specifically Italians. They were just like generic New York street.
Just okay, so yeah,
Probably, probably Italian.
yeah, probably Italian, yeah. So yeah, the shark that was the Sharks, and then the Jets were the Puerto
Puerto Rican.
Ricans.
Yep.
Yeah, okay,
The PRs. Yep.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and it's the same thing there, where yeah, it's you've got the two families, yeah, and the two gangs, two families that hate each other, and
Mhm.
and but then you got the boy and the girl who really love each other, and and then they take some pretty drastic steps to to
Yeah,
be
to try.
together.
Now, now let's talk a little. Now, that just triggered something in my mind. Um, the external rack is harder to spin into an endless series than the internal rack, or the character the character based rack. Because like the West Side Story scenario, you could have a happy ending happen with that. Like, imagine that they had managed to skip town and move to New Jersey, or New Jersey probably wouldn't be far enough away. They moved to Cincinnati and they
Yeah.
start a family together. Like, okay, the story is now done. Move on.
Hmm.
Or okay, they're both dead now. Story is done. Move on.
Hmm.
Nobody wants like a continuation with oh, what happened to the Sharks and the Jets afterwards? Well, they probably had more pointless fights because people are stupid. But
Yes.
or the fight is over. Either way, the point of the story is done. Move on.
Hmm.
Well, the meanwhile, if you have like the internal rack, it's like, oh well, Ross and Rachel ever get together, or will Bones ever get the bone?
Hmm. Yeah.
uh, that you can spin off for ages, because it's just soap opera at that point. It's, oh well, character A has said this stupid thing that has offended character B. Will character B get over it? What will character A do to win this character B back? Okay, they're back together. Oh no, character C, character A's ex from the academy has shown up and she wants to get back into it again. Will
Yeah.
character B be able to fight off character C's advances?
Hmm.
Uh, uh,
Yeah, that's the And you could kind of call that an external rack as well, with with the introduction of a romantic rival.
That's true. Uh, but I guess it's more like I, it's a harsh external reality, like the Romeo and Juliet scenario, that has to be resolved fairly quick because I can't think of. And I'm sure I'm missing something, but I can't think of any series that built like a long-standing series on that type of thing. You had to have something else going on.
Yeah.
Uh, because let's say the Lord of the Rings had more of a romantic bent. Like you have Arwen and like
Um. Uh, um. Uh, Arwen and
Hugo Weaving,
um
Aragorn,
Aragorn. No, Viggo Mortensen.
Vigo. Who am I? Okay, so
Elrod was Hugo Weaving.
oh, that's right, that's right. See, I don't.
Elrond was
I,
was Erwin's
that,
father. Yeah,
that's right. I'm not good with character names.
that's okay.
Like that's like a fun side story that like their races and like her immortality keeps them apart.
Hmm.
But yeah, I don't think you could do a trilogy of movies focused entirely on that. You'd at some point it'd be like, okay, you two crazy kids, are you going to actually get together
Yeah,
or what?
yeah,
It's funny that like the will they won't they plot is the easiest to spin into an ongoing series with the right setup, but it's also the one that tends to like audiences that leave the most pissed off if they quit partway through.
yeah,
Uh, it's like, okay, I see no reason to ever read an Archie comic again. I know that he will that he
yeah,
and hey, like Betty or Veronica, who cares? It'll depend. It'll go issue by issue. Usually Betty wins
yeah.
because that's
Although
more
I,
interesting.
I although I think in one of the more recent comic books, I think Archie and Veronica do get married.
Yeah, though that was written by Mark Waid, so
Oh, okay. Okay.
yeah, that Comics Perch had an interesting one
Oh,
about that one today. That reminded me of it. So that's which is why I had Archie and Veronica. Uh, although, and like you can get weird. There were weird things where like there were some comics that I remember reprinted from the '50s where you had Archie and Veronica who were clearly a couple, and you had Betty and Reggie teaming up to try to split them up. Like a very different dynamic than I was used to.
yeah. Wow.
But
Yeah.
but yeah. So it's not that like your life ends as soon as your romance is done. It's just that it's if it's the French onion soup, you'll notice that they don't usually do jumbo size servings of French onion soup. That's a very strong flavor that it's a good appetizer, but not necessarily what you want to just sit there and eat gallon after gallon of.
Yeah. Yeah. Or I actually have a French soup story. Well, it's not my story. It's actually with my mother. But we were actually in France. And she was eating French onion soup, and some of the cheese got in her throat, and like she was
On or in?
yeah, it was in
Oh,
her throat, and she was kind of choking on it, and like the what happened was every time she'd take a breath, the cheese would expand in her
oh.
throat. And yes, so yeah, she's sitting there eating the soup, and all of a sudden she starts going, and we're looking at her like,
The cheese ball was in her throat, right?
yeah, she had a cheese ball,
Oh
and we're
my
like, you okay? You're not. I don't know the Heimlich,
God. Eh,
but
Out there,
yeah,
they
but
just call it
yeah.
French soup or onion soup.
No, I think they called it French onion. Yeah,
Okay.
because yeah. They or no, they might have called that onion soup. I can't remember. This was 20+ years ago, so
Well,
yeah.
it sounds like it has a happy ending because I know you've referred to your mother in the present tense in the meantime.
Yes. She is alive and well. Yeah. But anyway, getting back to romance.
Actually, that's a good analogy. You can choke on the will they won't they, and the audience
Yes.
they just eventually metaphorically keel over out of frustration because it's like you did it too much. We This is the third go round. We no longer care if Ross and Rachel get together. Go away.
Yes. Yeah. And if and I will say that that's a trope that was used in sitcoms long before Friends.
Yep.
You know, it was used on Cheers with first with Sam and Diane, and then Sam and whatever, I can't remember, Kirstie Alley's character, and then other subsequent shows like it.
Boy, you talk about actresses that I had a crush on growing up who did not age
You had
gracefully.
a, oh, you had a crush on Kirstie Alley?
Yeah, like I saw her in Look Who's Talking and the Star
Oh.
Trek movies, and
Well, she looked good in those
yeah,
movies, and
that
she
was her
looked good.
time.
Yeah, yeah, and she looked good in like the first couple of years on she was on Cheers, but then yeah, got a got a little
Yeah, and just became kind of a tabloid disaster area anyway.
yeah,
But
mm,
that's so yeah. So yeah. So that was we're running low on time. So basically I guess it's interesting the different ways that one can approach it. But it seems like the best approach is figure out what your source of conflict is, and don't overstay your welcome.
yes, yeah, and when you commit.
Right. Don't go, oh no, we got another season. We don't know what to do. We'll switch back to won't they mode. Like, no,
Yeah,
you had a wedding, or no, you had a kid, or no, you now in real life you aren't necessarily connected to somebody you have a kid with forever romantically, but fiction is different because um, fiction is different in so much as, unlike reality, fiction has to have a payoff that's satisfying.
yes,
Reality is often disappointing. We turn to fiction because fiction makes sense because a human is writing it.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah, and D Rhino, I would agree. Yeah, keep it simple.
Yep. Yeah, I have love complications all over the place in Magpie Wizard, but once a choice is made, it is made.
Yes, once best girl has been established.
Well, I'll just say that Soren ruins some things,
Ah,
but because he waffles. So learn
ah,
from Soren.
yeah, yeah. Yes, and yeah, and I will, with me, there will be love in the air at some point. Um,
Mhm.
just stay tuned for it. You know, hint,
Yep.
hint.
Yeah. But book three, will they, won't they?
Book three, will they, won't they? Yeah.
Actually, no, book three, will they? Book four, won't they? Book three, will they harder with a vengeance?
Yes. All right. Well, yeah. As as we get near the end, any other questions for us?
Questions, comments, death threats. We'll take them all.
Yeah. Just, just don't dox us. Yeah. Do, 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 do,
Yeah,
do.
I almost wish I was a horror writer because that's like the serial killer obsessed with a lost sister is an interesting angle, but I don't want to write a serial killer.
Yeah.
Just in general, I'm more of a monster of the week kind of guy
Yeah.
or romantic comedy.
Stay tuned next time on Love Blossom. That actually does sound like that sounds like a teen soap opera.
Uh, 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 Yeah, teen soap opera or possibly some sort of anime with a mostly or entirely female cast.
Yeah.
Could be Yuri, it could just be one guy that they're all after.
Yeah. Yes, the dashing, handsome protagonist.
Or the loser schlub protagonist of the audience doesn't feel bad.
Yeah.
Oh,
Who's yeah, completely oblivious.
which that's an entirely different type of love wreck. Is protagonist is too dense to notice that he has a chance with all these girls.
Yes. All right. Well, I guess if no one has any other questions for us, we'll close it out here. Any final words, DB?
Well, look for some changes coming up soon. We've been
Okay.
talking about ways to grow the podcast, and my bad, I did not research if there was another podcast called Tuesday with Story. Now, they're called Tuesdays with Stories, and they're more of like humorous anecdotes that these two comedians tell. But we have some. It seems like a decent idea to move to another title and possibly format at some point. So
Yeah. Yeah. But keep an eye out for that. We'll definitely keep you all updated on any changes we make in the future. So,
yep,
but,
probably keep going like this for now, just because it's a good routine. But yeah, there's some different ways we could finagle it.
yes. All right. Thank you everybody for watching. We really appreciate it. Hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, do the bell, and we'll
And pre-order his comic.
pre-order. Yes, sign up for the mailing list. Buy some of his books,
Hmm.
and we'll see you all next time. Good night, everybody.
Bye bye, Boo.